Hello friends, let us study about the properties of reflexes part 2.
Then comes a property of facilitation. So what does this mean? Facilitation. Okay. Facilitation means, what does exactly the word facilitation means? It means as if you are facilitating something, the action of facilitating is called as facilitation. So in a reflex, when a reflex is elicited repeatedly, suppose you are exciting any of the receptors again and again, the response becomes progressively higher after few occasions. This is what is called as facilitation, and that occurs in the synapses, and hence it can also be the property of a reflex. So what is that example? I can just take you for an example that, motor neurons we have a lot of fibers coming onto the motor neurons. Ultimately, what happens is these reflexes, or I should take what example? Okay, let me take it for the skeletal muscle example. In the case of skeletal muscles, in the experimental physiology, we do an example, right? Something called as successive stimuli. So there is where what do we see? That also is actually a reflex. You are stimulating a nerve fiber, and then you are getting a response by contraction of a muscle. That is a reflex after all. So let me tell you the facilitation over there by the beneficial effect. How is that happening? Suppose you take an example of fatigue. So in fatigue, what do? You give successive stimulus one by one. So if this is the latent period, okay, this is my latent period, you gave one stimulus, you found one response. After some time, you give another stimulus, you get another response. You give another response like this. If this was the first one, this is the second one, and this is the third one. What has happened is, after you have given a stimulus, okay, and you give successive stimulus, the next stimulus gets benefited from the first stimulus. Because of what? Because of one, that there is increased availability of neurotransmitters. There is increased availability of calcium ions. And because there has been activity going on, some amount of metabolic energy is also generated. And so viscosity has also reduced. So this is about the experimental physiology where we see the beneficial effect. This is also a facilitating effect. Your first one is facilitating the effect or the response of the second one. Here, in case of reflex, very similar but little different. What does it say? That when a reflex is elicited repeatedly at proper intervals, the response becomes progressively higher for first few occasions. How it we have seen in case of fatigue. This is due to facilitation, and we know that this facilitation at the synapse is probably due to increased availability of the neurotransmitter. Right? So that is also a property of reflex. That's called as facilitation. Then comes inhibition. So what is this inhibition? We have seen of the reciprocal inhibition. During a reflex activity, impulses from sensory fibers from protagonist muscles, they inhibit the action of antagonist muscle. For example, in reciprocal inhibition, a tendon here, there was a reflex hammer here, you tapped it. So what has happened here? There were muscles, and there was muscle spindle also here. Okay, so you have stretched this. So what has happened? The 1A fibers, they are going to go to the spinal cord, and they are going to go to the alpha motor neurons for the extensors, and they are going to stimulate the extensors, right? They are the agonist muscles. But there will be some collaterals who are going to go on to the inhibitory interneuron. So they are going to stimulate this inhibitory interneuron, which in turn is going to inhibit my alpha motor neurons going to the protagonist muscles or the flexor muscles. So this type of connection is called as reciprocal inhibition. Okay, this is an example of reciprocal inhibition as I have shown you here. Now let us go something for after discharge. What is this after discharge? When a reflex action is elicited continuously for some time and then the stimulation is stopped, the reflex response or the contraction may continue for some time even after the cessation of the stimulus. This is called as after discharge. Okay. And this is mainly because of the internuncial neurons who continue the transmit of impulses to the center even after the cessation of stimulus. I think I can show you one such example with the help of a screen. Here, there was a burning. You had put your finger, right? So what has happened? The impulses have gone through the dorsal root ganglion. They went and they gave multiple interneurons, okay? Withdrawal reflex is reverberating. We know that, there is rebounding here. What happens is I have my muscle fiber, alpha motor neurons going to the flexors who are going to get contracted, okay? And there may be motor neurons to the extensors who are going to be inhibited so that I'm able to flex my arm away. Okay, to the extensor it goes, and so that is. Now, we have seen sometime if the stimulus is too noxious, if it's too noxious and lot of impulses are coming here. Noxious means maybe it is too hot, suddenly big fire, or maybe you got cut, or you got a pinprick, or you got a glass cut, or whatever it is. So my intention to tell you is that suppose the impulse was so strong enough that it kind of, it went on and you had contracted your fingers or arms away from it. What do you continue to do? You still continue to keep it contracted. Suppose you have put your finger somewhere, your hand was there, and suddenly a honeybee comes and stings you. What is that thing? You just immediately, flex your hand and you keep shaking it. You still keep shaking and you're not yet much aware of it. It's not that you have just once you did the flexion and you are happy, okay, I gave a response to of withdrawal. Not like that. You still keep contracting, muscles, you keep shaking your hand and you start just doing all those activity. What is it because? It's because that now this honeybee has gone away. It anyway had sting, caused you a sting. Okay, it has bitten you, there is a sting there. And now this is giving you a stimulus, continuous stimulus is going on, and you are having an after discharge effect of that. Okay, you have kind of washed that area. Sting is not a good example because since it gives some chemicals and that chemicals keeps irritating. The best example I can say you is like psychological after discharge, right? You go and watch some movie which you were so much engrossed with, and you come out of the cinema hall and you are still in that movie, you're still with the movie, you're still imagining those situations, and your feelings and your emotions is all attached to that movie still. So that exactly is what after discharge. You are no longer watching movie, but still you are kind of thinking about that movie and you're still into that situation. That is what is called as an after discharge.